listening to the Elim Church Northampton podcast. This message was recorded live as part of our regular Sunday service. We know that this is a great investment into your life, so tune in and give it a listen. For more information, visit elimnorthampton.com.
Please be seated. Well, it's a great privilege to introduce our friend Mark Greenwood with us. Mark has been travelling with our church now for a long time, and we were just saying that this will be the last preach that he does in this building.
Yeah.
And he actually is with us Christmas for an outreach, so he'll be the first preacher in the new building. Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
So that's great.
Yeah, brilliant.
And we're going to do something a little bit different today. I was thinking about when Mark was coming that I'd like him to equip us a little bit more when I spoke to you about the message of salvation, how you can share your faith. I think it's really important that as a church we are equipped to be more effective in telling people about Jesus. And we want to try and put in your hands and also something that will make it easy, because sometimes when you say, oh, we're going to do evangelism, everybody cringes. I remember when I first became a Christian, and evangelism was going on the streets talking to strangers about God, and that was so scary. In fact, every Friday night I felt sick doing it, but I was glad when I came out when I did do it. Yeah. It's amazing to see God work. But we want to try and equip you so you will get confidence to share your faith naturally, supernaturally. Yeah. And so Mark is great at that, so I've asked him to do something. And so can we have him a big welcome? Thank you, Mark, as you come today. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Pastor Jason. Morning, everyone. So exciting to hear the news of the church building. And we look forward to all that God's going to do when we get in there, isn't it? Because that's not arrival, is it? It's the start of the next season, isn't it? So it's really, really exciting. And do pray for Pastor Jason and Linda, because, listen, I've moved home. Oh, no, I'm moving home. And even just on that level, and it's gone really easy. It's stressful, isn't it? Anybody moved home before? What a nightmare, isn't it? So imagine that on a much bigger scale. So I know that you're praying for them, and please continue to do so. It is delightful to be here with you. I always love coming here to share with you folks. It's been quite a few years, hasn't it, that we've journeyed together, and looking forward to all that God's going to continue to do as we journey together. But what I'm going to chat to you about this morning over the next little while is, as Pastor Jason mentioned, it's something a little bit different. I'm going to tell you some stories that will encourage you. Anybody like being encouraged? Yes, some of you know. That's interesting. Okay, so I like being encouraged. So I'm going to tell you some stories to encourage you a little bit. And then we're going to have a little look at some bits from the Bible to help us a little bit more. And then we're going to make you aware of some resource. And then I'm going to set you a little challenge, a very doable challenge. Anybody up for a doable challenge? Oh, that was a groan. That was a groan. Okay, that's my challenge, to move you from groan to semi-groan. That'll do. If we just have a semi-groan, I'll be happy with that. I'll consider my job done. So, have you noticed that every one of us, it seems to be on some kind of journey? Like I've been this year trying to just steadily lose a little bit more weight. Thanks for noticing. Did you actually notice? Oh, thank you. Yeah, baby, thank you. I've got a little swagger on me now, don't you worry about that. So, but it's interesting because, like, apparently we're not on diets anymore. We're on weight loss journeys. Have you noticed that? So, and some journeys are going so well, some journeys are not going so well, aren't they? But the thing is, the journey, the concept of journey is something it's like really in vogue, isn't it? Like, I'm on a well-being journey. You're familiar with those phrases. We've said it this morning that we've been on a bit of a journey with regards to the building. So the journey is something that's a concept that we are all familiar with. But I want to suggest to you, it's not just a cultural phrase. It's not just a in-the-moment word that's in vogue, and in 6 or 7 years' time, we might not use it anymore. I want to suggest to you that actually quite quite above and beyond that, it's actually a biblical concept. The word journey is a really biblical concept. And certainly when it comes to people coming to faith and becoming Christians, we have to understand that it really, really is a bit of a journey. Let me tell you about Dave. And to tell you about Dave, I also need to tell you about Alan. Alan's interesting. So I was speaking at my home church at the time, which was the Elim Church in Huddersfield. For those of you who may or may not know, this church is an Elim church, part of over 500 churches around the UK and over 4,000 globally. And I was speaking at the church in Huddersfield. It was actually the church that I attended at the time, but this particular morning, they'd asked me to do a talk for people who weren't Christians, to help them understand what the Christian faith's really all about. So I delivered that talk, and as per usual, I gave an opportunity for people to come to Christ. And Alan becomes a Christian. And Alan comes to see me at the end, and he's buzzing, he's really excited, he's all fired up, something's clearly happened in his life. And then about 6 weeks later, I'm back at the church, only this time I'm back as a member of the church. I book in some Sundays, because those of you who know me well, you'll know that I'm out quite a lot, so I book in some Sundays so that I can just go to church and be at church, and it's lovely. And this particular Sunday, this 6 or so weeks after, it was one of those Sundays, and I walked in, and then a service happened, and then we stopped for a hot, tasty beverage at the end of the service with a biscuit, and had a bit and there was Alan, and I could see him out the corner of my eye, and I could see that he had a big smile on his face, and he ran over to me. He said, "Oh, Mark, I can't thank you enough." He said, "There must be something I can do to say thank you, to pay you back." And I'm going, "Oh no, this is a bit awkward. You don't have to do anything, you know." It's because I've dealt with this a long time ago, folks, that God is the Lord of the harvest. And my job is to be the best that I can be at telling people about Jesus. And that's a fair gauge. And that's why you'll never ever hear me stand up and challenge the church to say, "When did you last lead somebody to Christ?" Because that's not my job. That's his job. He's the Lord of the harvest. Now, I think a fair challenge is, when did you last share your faith, tell your story, invite somebody along to Alpha? That's a fair challenge, isn't it? Because that's something we can do something about. So I'm totally okay with the fact that it's God that transforms lives. I'm totally up with that. And so any sort of sniff of it looking like somebody thinks it's down to me, then I want to kind of detract that a little bit. So I'm trying to no, Alan, it's nothing to do with me. You don't need to say thank you to me. And he said, no, I've got to say thank you to me. Because by now, not only had Alan made a commitment, his wife had made a commitment, his daughter had made a commitment, and his son was kind of on the journey a bit as well. So you can see why he's a bit giddy with excitement, can't you? So I'm trying to kind of detract him. So I thought, right, what am I going to do? So I said to him, "Oh, Alan, tell me, what do you do for a job?" I thought, that'll get him off the scent. So he said, "Well, let me tell you." Let me pause the story there. You see, for quite a few years, I'd been kind of printing, if that's the right phrase. Who remembers the Epson stylus inkjet printers? Those heady days, Those heady days when printers were printers. And I did a lot of open air work at the time. And I designed a whole bunch of leaflets, and we took them out and used them on the streets. And they were fine until it rained. And then printed on an inkjet printer, it's not good, because all of a sudden all the text starts going. And by now, of course, a few churches had started to want to buy them. I'd produced a bunch of different ones, and churches were wanting to order them. And my back room in New Hay Road in East Bowling, Bradford, BD4 8BY, resembled a print shop. It smelled of paper. Anybody like the smell of paper? Yeah, I do. Some of you feel that it's wrong to admit that in public, don't you? But I like the smell of paper and print, and when leaflets have just been printed. As I was printing these things, and it was a nightmare, and I was stapling them, and I'm really twitchy, like if borders are not quite right, I'll lose weeks of sleep, over things like that. So I thought, this is no good, and I've got to somehow find a better way to do this, because it was taking loads of time, and late at night, early hours. So I'd prayed about it, and I moved on, ladies and gentlemen, to a colour laser printer. I know. And then I thought, this is still ridiculous. Yeah, it's speeding it up. Yeah, the ink doesn't run, but goodness me, I'm spending a huge amount of time. Now, I'd managed to sell enough leaflets to have about £1,000 in my bank account. Now, what you've got to understand about it, at this time in my ministry, I could barely pay myself. Honestly, I literally, no joking aside, literally lived on what came through the letterbox, plus a few kind people had said, we'll support what you're doing. One of them, my mum. She had to really, didn't she, to be honest with you. But I'd got £1,000, and I'd said to the Lord, I've got this £1,000 that I need to get these printed in some way. Please find a way forward, because £1,000, folks, it's a lot of money now. It was a lot of money then. It's a lot of money now. So I'm like, I really need you to provide, Lord. Let me take you back to Alan. No, Alan, there's nothing you can do for me to say thank you. No, nothing at all. You owe me nothing. I've got to get him off the scent. So what do you do, Alan? I'm a printer. I own my own company. Maybe there is something you can do, Alan. So I said to him, look, Alan, here's the deal. You don't have to do that. And I was really transparent with him, really honest with him. I said, look, Alan, if you want to do something, it's not thanking me. You owe me no thanks at all. But if you want to do something to help other people, I maintain the best way of saying thank you to God for what he's done in our lives is to tell other people. That's my slant on things. I think that's such an important thing, because when you appreciate something, you tell others, don't you? So I said to Alan, here's the situation, and I explained to him. Now at this point, I'd got 3 leaflets, full colour, and a booklet, I think it was. So 4 separate things. He said to me, I'll pay for it all. I said, wow, that's amazing. Thank you, but please, I had to wrestle him on this one. Let me give you this £1,000. And I explained that I'd got this £1,000 and I'd asked the Lord to provide. And so from my own sort of integrity perspective, I really felt that I needed to pay that £1,000. Does that make sense? I didn't feel it would be right for me not to pay that, even though he was really kind. And eventually he agreed. So this is why I'm telling you. I walked around to his print shop on the Monday morning. And when people first become Christians, they're not very sensitive, are they? And they're really, they're quite enthusiastic. Give us a few years, we'll knock it out of them. But in those early days, they're not very sensitive, are they? They're really not. And Alan was like that. So this was Alan's introduction to David, his designer, who wasn't a Christian. I walked in, he went, David, this is Mark. Mark, this is David. He's an atheist. Get him. And I'm finding myself doing that thing that you do when your children embarrass you in public. Do you know what I mean? Where you're sort of trying to cover it up a little bit. Oh, yeah. Oh, do you know what I mean? I'm finding myself doing that. And then, so I got chatting with Dave, and I said, and then Dave said an interesting thing, because I said to him, I'm sure, Dave, as you begin to read these leaflets, it'll make sense to you. Some things will add up and what have you. He said, oh, no, I'm a designer. We don't really read the text. Now, I've worked with designers and wonder whether they've ever really read the text I've given them. Obviously, if there's any designers present here today, you're the exception, clearly. You're clearly the exception. And then Dave said to me, he said, oh no, he said, I'm not interested. And then I found myself, and I don't normally do this, I don't normally do. This isn't my default setting. And I just found myself saying, me and God are going to get you. And I'm thinking, I'm starting to talk like Alan now. I'm starting to talk like Alan. That's not my modus operandi. And it's not a starting point. It's not my top tip, me and God are going to get you. It's not my top tip for sharing your faith. But something rose up within me and I just said it. So a couple of weeks later, I went to pick up the leaflets and the booklets. And Dave said to me, hey, Mark, I'll help you with them into the car. And I was really pleased about that because it was 10,000 of each of these 4 leaflets. That's 40,000 going into my Citroen BX, for those of you who remember those cars. And so we're carrying them in. And I think we'd got pretty well to the end with the last box. And Dave said to me, Mark, I said, yeah. He said, you got me. Now, I'd completely forgotten about the conversation that I'd had with him. I said, what do you mean? He said, you and God, you've got me. And I suddenly clocked. I said, what do you mean? Tell me more, tell me more. He said, basically what happened was as I was reading all these leaflets, it was all like falling into place. You said it would. You said it would. And what he'd done is he'd designed these leaflets the way, in a sense that I designed them to be read. Does that make sense? Like in the sequence, which was amazing because I'd not said anything. But then I found out, and this really blew me away and reminded me about this whole journey thing, is Dave said to me, Mark, what I haven't told you is when I was at university, so this probably would have been 8 or 9 years before this moment, he said, my best friend was a Christian. And one day he sat down and he said, look, Dave, I want to be really honest. I just want to tell you all about my life. And he said, but let me tell you everything. He says, now, I won't say it again unless you ask me. And he told him everything. He told him his story. He told him what he believed. And true to form, he never said anything again until David has asked him. And Dave said to me, when I was reading through your leaflets, Mark, it took me back to that moment when I was remembering my friend's story and what he shared. And now I've seen what's happened in Alan and the change that's taken place there. He said, and I've met you and I've read your leaflets. He said, something's just happening. It's all falling into place. And a couple of years after that, he got baptized. How amazing is that? So good, isn't it? So good. Listen, I say this regularly, I have never, ever, ever once met somebody who's gone to bed being an atheist and woke up wanting to become a Christian. I'm not saying they're not out there, but I'm just saying I haven't met them. And I started doing this in 1988. And I travel about 30,000 miles a year. But what I have heard and what I do hear constantly is it's a journey. And what I do meet is people who've been here and this has happened and this has happened. So I want to lay you a genteel challenge this morning to make a decision today to go on a journey with some people. Not that you've got to ram it all over in one fell swoop. I pray regularly, Lord, just lead me to somebody today who's ready to have a conversation about you. That's all I do. Because it's a journey. Let me take you to a bit in the Bible which probably best represents what many of us feel was an overnight conversion. I'm going to take you to Acts chapter 26, verse 24. And we're going to have a little look at a couple of little bits around there, a couple of little sentences. It's the conversion of the Apostle Paul, or Saul as he was, at the time he got converted. Now, have you ever heard, and maybe you've even said it yourself, somebody when telling their testimony say something along the lines of, well, it wasn't a blinding flash of light for me. It wasn't a Damascus Road experience for me. For me, it was something more gradual. Have you ever heard people say those sorts of things? And of course, what they're referring to is Saul's conversion, aren't they? But I want to suggest to you today that Saul didn't have a Damascus Road experience. Okay. Geographically, he did. Granted, he did. Geographically, it happened. This thing happened on the Damascus Road. But what we've interpreted that to be isn't actually what it was. So here we go, Acts chapter 26. It's really fascinating. At this point, Festus interrupted Paul's defense. So here's Paul. And this passage is one of three big parts in the Bible from which we build up a picture of Saul's conversion. Acts 9, we read it, which is kind of as it happened. Acts 22, which is where he's in a public marketplace, sort of doing an open-air meeting, for want of a better phrase. And here in Acts 26, where he's sharing his story in the defense of who he is and what he's being charged for. And so Festus, he's kicking off. He's really angry. He says, "You're out of your mind, Paul. Your great learning is driving you insane." We have to acknowledge that people think we're a little bit out of our mind. We've already said, we were reminded that we are a peculiar people. It's in the book. It's in the book. And people can look at the Christian faith and think it's insane, can think it's bonkers, especially when it's culturally disconnected, as oft is accused of our faith. But interesting enough, the response here, great learning is driving you insane. Verse 25, "I'm not insane, most excellent Festus." Saul, or Paul as he's now called, his reply was very respectful. If you do a little bit of digging around, you realize most excellent Festus is the kind of phrase that would be used in the presence of an ambassador. So somebody who you are respectful towards. So out of this accusation, out of this negativity, you're out of your mind, you're insane, you're great learning, you're bonkers, you're an idiot for believing that kind of stuff. He didn't rise to the bait, did he? He just stayed gentle and respectful because he had a quiet confidence about what's taken place in his life. So let's make sure, because we are going to get some people saying you're bonkers, you're crazy, you're an idiot. You believe that stuff, do you? What, that? You believe somebody rose from the dead? You believe that, do you? Let's make sure, as we journey with people, let's just be respectful. Not play like with like. Be kind and gracious and respectful. Something we're not always very good at. "I'm not insane, most excellent Festus," Paul replied. So he first of all replied in a kind way. And then come back to this. "What I am saying is true and reasonable." Now, as Christians, we've historically been pretty good at declaring the truth of what we believe. But we've not always been very good at showing that it's reasonable. And the reason we don't do that is because we're not journeying with people. We don't have the opportunity. We're like in, out, bang, out. And actually what we want to do is build a journey with people so that we can show them that our faith is true and reasonable. Now, in the church at the moment, I think we're slightly shy of even declaring the truth of it. We're a little bit worried, but I want to say to you, rise up. Rise up. What you believe is true. 100% true. And it's reasonable. So be confident in its truth and be confident in its reasonableness and learn to be able to get better at sharing your faith. Learn to be able to get better at handling tricky questions. If you'd like to get some really practical top tips, a few years ago, I filmed in this room a thing called Boot Camp Light. We've done boot camp here at the church before. If you'd like to just get a little refresher, or if you'd like to learn some new stuff, go to revmarkgreenwood.com/shop, and you'll see Boot Camp Light. completely free of charge. You can download the videos and you can learn some stuff about telling your stories, sharing the gospel, handling tricky questions, leading somebody to Christ. So you can get better at doing that kind of stuff. But make sure you understand it's true and reasonable. Don't compromise on the truth. Don't be ashamed of the truth. Be confident, but also be able to show that it's reasonable, because our faith is not only true, it's reasonable. And then the other thing I want to share with you linked with this is, look at verse 28 now. So, then Agrippa said to Paul, "Do you think in such a short time you can persuade me to become a Christian?" Paul replied, verse 29, "Short time or long, I pray to God that not only you, but all who are listening to me today will become as I am, except for these chains." Short time or long. Don't hold back on the truth. Learn to show that it's reasonable, and be patient. Be patient. How good are you at praying for somebody over years to become a Christian? Or do you get a bit bored, a little bit fed up, a little bit impatient, a little bit frustrated when you haven't seen any kind of movement? Paul says, short time or long, I pray. So his first commitment, and the first thing we should do, and the first thing we can do, is pray. Pray like crazy for every single person that you know who doesn't know Jesus. I've just had a conversation this week, and one of the things we're looking to do as a movement, it'll come out over the next sort of few years, it'll come out over the next sort of few months, not few years, sorry, but it'll be developed over the next few years, is I felt deeply stirred in the last 6 to 7 months that we need to call our movement and every Christian in it to pray for those people in their world that don't know Jesus. So we're going to facilitate some stuff around that. Not necessarily praying for revival, pray for that. I don't know what that is, but pray for it. It's going to be a good thing, however it looks. Okay, but praying for all the people that you and I, imagine that. Imagine if every single one of us were praying for each other's friends, and we were praying for our friends to come to know Jesus. How amazing would that be? And for us to be committed to it long term. So short time or long, I pray to God that not only you who are listening, but to me today, I pray to God that not only you, but all who are listening to me today will become as I am, except for these chains. Now, say a few more things around that, and then a few little practical resources to help you to begin to take some steps forward. I'm not going to say a lot about this, but I just want to say a few things to help you to understand what I presented, that Saul's conversion wasn't an overnight thing. It wasn't just one thing that happened in that moment. When you have a dig around, and that's why it's really good, if you piece together the Acts 9, the Acts 22, and the Acts 26 narrative, I'm going to set you a bit of homework actually. Go and do it. Just take the 3 passages and just draw up a little timeline. It's really interesting what you discover about Saul's thing. And one of the things that Jesus said to Saul was, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? And then he goes on to say, it's impossible for you to kick against the goads. It's an interesting phrase, that. A goad was an agricultural implement, similar probably in shape and size, to give you a rough idea, to like a pool cue. You know, like a pool cue that's sort of thicker and fatter at one end and then sort of diagonalizes down and comes to sort of a point or a smaller bit. And a goad was like that. And what a goad would do is when an oxen had this heavy load and didn't want to sort of get up and carry it, the farmhand would get the goad, and they wouldn't smack them over the head with the thick bit. It just gently nudge, gently irritate. Have you heard of the phrase goading? They were goaded. When somebody did something and finally gave in, it's because they had been goaded. It wasn't that one moment. It was, as the phrase goes, the straw that breaks the camel's back. It's like all that other stuff. And so the goading was what they were doing. The notion being it would become more comfortable for the oxen to get up and move than it would be to stay where it was. And that's this idea that over time there's just this nudging and this goading, and finally somebody becomes a Christian. They give in, as it were, to the Lord's goadings, the Lord's nudgings, just this gentle pushing to get them up and move. Some of you think, I'll use one of those with my teenage children when they won't get out of bed. It's just this line of goading so they finally get up. So we know that the Lord had been goading. We know the Lord had been on his case. We can guess maybe what some of that might have been. There's no great detail about what exactly that was. We could surmise. We know he was present at the stoning of Stephen because we read that. So was that something? We certainly know he was around at the time of Jesus and clearly aware of the impact that followers of Jesus were having on the world, and Jesus was having on his followers. We can see that because this moment in time he's going to kill a few more Christians. So we know all that kind of stuff. A few scholars have suggested that maybe one of Saul's relatives, potentially his sister, had become a follower of the way, had become a believer, had become a Christian. We don't know exactly, but what we do know, because of what Jesus is saying to him, he's been on him. We know that Saul was already a believer. He wasn't an atheist when this happened. He believed in God. He was fiercely a believer in God, as were his parents. He was schooled under Gamaliel, one of the most prestigious teachers. But what happened on this moment in time is he'd been aware of Jesus, that we do know, and now he's met not just Jesus, but the crucified, risen Jesus. And that's what we want to do in our gospel sharing. We want to be patient. We don't want to hold back on the truth. We want to show that it's reasonable. We want to be in it for the long haul, not just the short. We want to pray for the long haul. We want to introduce people to Jesus, not just his death and resurrection, but also his death and resurrection. We want to introduce people to Jesus because Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, not just the message of his death and his resurrection, though we need to not hold back on those. And so with that in mind, this is the little challenge I want to lay out for you today. I've this leaflet. I've made some tweaks to bring it up to date. And we've had a redesign. But you see this leaflet here? This leaflet is one of the leaflets that Dave designed. You know Dave that I told you at the beginning, who became a Christian, one of the 10,000 that I picked up and carried to my car. And he said, "You and God, you've got me." That's one of the leaflets Dave designed. Now, we've reshaped it, revamped it, brought it a bit more up to date. I've got a new language that I've developed called Big Yes, Yes, Healthy Maybe, down through the years. But what we're going to do this morning, I want to lay you a little challenge. Don't worry too much about how it's going to happen. Just respond to the challenge. And every single day, pray this prayer to Jesus. Jesus, help me to have a conversation with somebody today. Not even necessarily a conversation about you, just a conversation with somebody today. Somebody once said to me, how do you start a conversation with somebody about Jesus? And I said, I've never, to the best of my knowledge, started a conversation with somebody about Jesus. I've just started conversations with people. I set out to converse, not to convert. That's what I do. But I keep these. I've got some in my bag there. I've got them in the boot of my car. And I find quite regularly I'll get into conversation with somebody, and it does end up having a conversation about faith. And so I've produced these. Okay, this morning, this is what we're going to do. This is where I'm going back to my market trading days now, from when I was a butcher, okay? Stage left, down to your right, I've got these in packs of 10, okay? £4 you can pay by cash, card, phone, or watch, so long as your watch works with paying for things, okay? And buy 10 of these for £4, that's 40p each. I'm going to quickly flash up. Oh, they've done it. They're on it. They're not messing about. Let me just give you a quick idea. This leaflet at the front has got a circle on it. And it starts inside by saying, if this circle contains the knowledge of the whole world, so this is an interactive thing you can do with your friends and your family, so you can be proactive with this as well. So keep a pen with you. And this knowledge here, this circle here, on the front of this leaflet contains the knowledge of the whole world. And you get the person to put a little dot on there that best represents their knowledge relative to the knowledge of the whole world. Does that make sense? And so they'll have a little dot, say something like here, for example. And then I'll say to the person, so you can see that's your knowledge, and that now represents everything else that is outside of your knowledge. Things that you don't know. Other people might know about them, but you don't know about them. So you would never ever say that just because you don't know about something, it's not real or it isn't true or it doesn't exist, would you? And of course, you know, most normal people would agree with that. So then I posture, is it possible that God could exist, but you just don't know about him? And then we go through the leaflet. Is it possible that Jesus did die, but you just don't know about it? And is it possible that it is all true, but you just don't know about it? And then it's got opportunity for people to accept Christ, to explore, or just to become open-minded. That's my big yes, little yes, healthy baby. And you can see the guys have been flicking through those brilliantly. Thank you very much. And then, if you get involved in good conversations, on the very, very back there, you've got all the information you need to help to lead somebody in a prayer to receive in Jesus. Now, here's the deal. 10 of these leaflets for £4. We're going to give you something completely free. And this is called Look Closer, Mark's Gospel. I took Mark's Gospel, and I'm not going to go into too much information about why I did it, just for the sake of time this morning. It's not my purpose. But I took Mark's Gospel, and I just made it really nice for people to read who aren't followers of Jesus. We threw thousands of pounds at it, really ramped up the design. It's rammed full of testimonies of people at the beginning of each chapter of Mark's Gospel. There's Jason's testimony in there, and there's a little bit where I crop up and just do a little bit of the gospel and help people to explore and unpack the gospel. And so how about this? Buy 10 of these, it'll cost you £4. Buy 10 of those, and if you do, I'm going to give you this one free of charge. The reason being is that somebody out of the 10, you might just find are more interested in finding out more, may even be ready to receive Jesus. 1 in 3 people, latest research conducted, Talking Jesus, 1 in 3 people that you will have a conversation with about God will be interested in an encounter or an investigation about the person of Jesus. And the best way to introduce people to Jesus is the gospel. And it's Mark's Gospel, it's the shorter one. So that's my little challenge for you today. Are you up for it? Are you ready for it? You think you can do it? Just a simple little thing, no pressure, just give it your best shot and leave the rest up to Jesus. But this morning, a practical way for responding is come down, and I'll just be down there, and you can buy some items. Let me pray for you, and then I'm going to hand back over to Pastor Jason. Lord Jesus, we pray that as a result of today, It's a bit of equipping, bit of practical challenge, bit of resourcing, that there'll be many, many people, Lord Jesus, who are ready to have a conversation with us about the Jesus we love. Help us, Lord, to get confident, to build up our confidence. And Father, I pray there'll be some amazing stories. And Lord, I pray that when we get into that new building, there'll be many of the people that we've talked to will be in that new building. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.